SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
When addiction takes control, getting help can change everything. Parkwood Behavioral Health System offers compassionate, evidence-based addiction treatment for adults right here in Mississippi. Take the first step today. Visit parkwoodbhs.com. Healing starts here. With limited exceptions, physicians are not employees or agents of this facility.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Midday SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music. Morning there, Rhino.
Howdy, howdy.
What in the world is going on today? It's a bunch, honestly. Up in one of the key battleground states, that would be the great state of Michigan. There's a big primary for a United States Senate seat, and all eyes are on that seat. There's record-breaking turnout. Socialist insurgents eye Midwest gains as Dem civil war threatens must-hold Senate seat. That the headline from one article about this big race. The Democrats are somewhat fractured, I would say. You got the crazy people and the stupid crazy people that kind of comprise the party. But this is really an interesting race that pits Abdul El Sayed and Haley Stevens. And Sayed shrugged off endorsements from the Democrat establishment figures, said endorsements don't vote, people vote. Okay. So high stakes in a key Democrat, or I should say a swing state. I couldn't help but think about Big Gretch. Big Gretchen Whitmer. We had a lot of fun with her back in the COVID era because the first thing you remember we caught was her making an exception, I want to say, for her husband to go out and fish, launch their boat. It was stupid to prohibit boating to start with, of course, but she made exceptions, and that surfaced. That made it into the news circles. Big Gretch. Boy, she loved being on TV every day back in those days, didn't she? They all did. That's the one thing the dang pandemic produced was a bunch of fame for people who otherwise nobody cared or knew about. I mean, you know about the governor of Michigan if you lived there, but she rose to national fame because she was at the podium every day announcing something dumb and stupid like Fauci. I mean, nobody knew who that guy was before the pandemic, and clearly from his diary, he was obsessed, consumed, enamored with his newfound fame to the point where it guided his decisions, really his advice. He doesn't make decisions, but he advised. And people trusted him, like our president. They should be able to trust him. But I'm afraid that he put his own personal fame and fortune over scientific fact. Remember when he famously said, Rhino, well, if you don't believe me, you don't believe science. I am science. Well, I guess science took the fifth last week, right? Oh, man. What a controversy that is. It's really a shame that the country was turned upside down, and we're still reeling from it in so many ways. Oh, geez. But nonetheless, up in Michigan, you also got midsummer primaries occurring in Kansas, Missouri, Virginia, and Washington State. So we shall see where this goes. It's a little scary, in my view. This guy, El Said, should he be elected or should he win the primary and advance to the general election? We got a major battleground state, that being Michigan, where there's a Democrat socialist on the ballot for a U.S. Senate seat. He is, by the way, a former health department director in Wayne County, Michigan. It's Representative Haley Stevens. It's a more moderate candidate that's backed by the establishment, and they are in a race to succeed current sitting Democratic Senator Gary Peters, who, by the way, has thrown his support behind Stevens. But he would be the first Muslim senator, by the way. El Said would be, should he prevail, of course, in this primary, and then move on to the general election and succeed. I haven't seen any polls. Rhino, have you seen any polling on this particular race? I think it's neck and neck, if I'm not mistaken. So it's just one to keep an eye on, because anytime you have a Senate seat in a swing state, that's something we need to pay attention to, because it can be a harbinger, an indicator of the upcoming midterms, as well as, even though it's a couple of years away, the 2028 presidential race.
The latest polls I'm seeing are from Emerson College.
Okay.
Their updated poll has Abdul El Said at 54%, with Haley Stevens at 39%. They still got responses for Mallory McMorrow, who dropped out on the 5th of July, and another 6% are undecided.
Okay. Well, it's pretty dang close. It's a toss-up, essentially, I would say, at this point. And we shall certainly see where we're headed with respect to that.
I mean, Abdul El Said has a double-digit lead.
But they still, I guess I was thinking about the number of undecided could erode some of that. But if I'm a betting man, I'm saying El Said's going to win the deal, is what I would say. Is that kind of the way you see it at this point?
Yeah, they've got it broken down by age, and it looks like it's the 40 to 49 age group that is the most in favor of Abdul El Said.
Wow. Okay. Most in favor. It's just amazing that those principles, their ideology is capturing the support of that age group. It's like, well, this capitalism thing isn't working for me, so let's dispense with it, right?
But that's not the age group I would have thought.
Okay.
It's 40 to 49.
Yeah,
It's not the 18 to 35 age group you usually associate with the socialist tendencies.
Well, I agree. I'm thinking more about those who are, I guess, struggling, for example, to buy a house. I'm thinking about, and you know, it shows us now that data shows now that age group is really struggling, and they're still unable to buy a house and upset. And so I think they're falling down into the same category. I guess is what I would say. With the age group, you're right, that typically you are a little younger and hadn't gotten into filing tax returns yet, and they're not really sure what to think about that. So there's some concern about our debt, of course. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to that, but it looks like that we may reach the $40 trillion mark this particular month. And the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, interestingly enough, has got a little tool where you can guess. It lays out the August calendar, presents that. You can guess what day in August we're going to cross that $40 trillion threshold. That's kind of interesting. We're sitting at $39 trillion and change right now. So I'm not sure, based on where it stands, if we're going to hit it in August. I'm thinking more September is likely when we'll cross that mark before the end of the fiscal year, which ends September 30th. Jim Leggette, lecturer of economics at Mississippi State at 11:05. Joel Anand joins us at 12:05.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
What? This is so
Awesome. On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. So just talking about the debt, currently sitting at $39 trillion, $840 billion. That's just, I'm laughing because the numbers are so big you start to get numb to it. So it is possible that we could cross that $40 trillion mark this month. That would require, $160 billion of new borrowing, which is fairly consistent with the amount we have borrowed on average per month for the first 10 months of the fiscal year. That would be through July. We have 2 months remaining. Yeah, so we certainly could, but I would say it would be more than likely towards the end of the month. And I know there's a lot of folks that wonder, well, geez, I thought we were cutting out all the wasteful spending with the DOGE initiative and some of the reforms in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act to Medicaid, SNAP, Medicare, that all of that should have added up to spending less money. And I agree. And it has. I mean, and in fact, you've seen, Rhino, the Democrats are absolutely hammering Republicans on these cuts. And they're really not cuts to Medicaid. That's how they misrepresent, or SNAP. It's just changing the eligibility process. And it's minor. So in other words, if you don't really qualify, you ain't getting any benefits. It's not that the benefits to the people who qualify were cut. That's the point I'm making. They still qualify. If they still qualify, they receive the same benefits they did before. It's just there's some people who are no longer deemed eligible. The big example in the Medicaid program is all the legal immigrants that had papers documented, if you will, not illegal in that they weren't documented and they shouldn't even be in the dang country. They don't have the government's permission to reside in the country. Well, all those people for decades have been eligible. Many people don't realize this. They're legal immigrants, to be distinguished from illegal immigrants, for Medicaid, for SNAP. And what the One Big Beautiful Bill did is it said no more. The only exception, as you recall, we talked about the Haitian immigrants and the Cuban immigrants, and that all goes back to the 80s and the boat people and existing statute and the need for 60 votes in the Senate to remove them from eligibility. But that's a small number of people relative to the 75 million on the Medicaid program. So when the Democrats say, oh, they cut the benefits, no. They simply said, first, if you're a legal immigrant, you're no longer eligible for Medicaid. So hopefully they go home on their own accord as a result. And then the other thing, as you know, was there a national work requirement was instituted for the able-bodied adult coverage group. That doesn't apply to Mississippi because we did not expand Medicaid. The expansion of Medicaid simply extended the coverage to low-income, so-called able-bodied adults. And it instituted some very reasonable, easy to satisfy, I would say, work requirements. And is that really an onerous request of the taxpayers? Hey, we're going to give you this free health care, but you got to work, or you got to be in school, or you got to be doing something. And that bar is pretty dang low. 80 hours a month, I think, is the standard. So the Democrats, I know you're shocked at this, they mischaracterize and misrepresent the policy. Now, all of that should add up. Where I'm going with this is, well, hopefully we're spending less money on Medicaid. Unfortunately, it doesn't, because the price of health care keeps going up, and the amount of money the federal government spends on Medicaid, consequently, goes up, as does the amount of money the states spend. It's breaking every state budget, including the state of Mississippi. Mark my word, folks. The Medicaid program in Mississippi requested a big chunk of additional funding this year. The legislature said we can't afford it. They're going to come back next year, not only with a deficit that the legislature is going to have to fund, going to have to cover. This year it was $50 million. Don't be surprised if it's not $200 million next year, thus essentially evaporating the projected $280 million surplus based on sine-die estimates of revenue and spending in state government. That's coming, no doubt about it. But unfortunately, we're not able to cut waste, fraud, and abuse at the rate at which all this other spending is increasing. And the line item, Rhino, in the budget that is increasing in the federal budget faster than any other line item in our budget, debt interest. And you can't cut that. It's not like waste, fraud, and abuse in debt interest. But that is the line item that is racing upward more than any other line item in the federal budget. It's just mind-boggling. So if you look at federal spending, the biggest line item, Social Security. Number 2, Medicare. Number 3, debt interest. Over $1 trillion, now fully 14% of our spending. We spend more on debt interest than we do defending the country. And let's think about that for a second, Rhino. Is defending the country a core function of government?
Yes.
Is debt interest a core function of government? You say where I'm going with this. But that's where we are. That's just insanity in my view. So, man, I hope that something changes. But, at this point, I don't see anything on the horizon. There just doesn't seem to be a will to clamp down any more than what we have. And there is a rather disturbing poll that shows that now people trust Democrats more to handle the economy. And I think this is largely driven by just this so-called affordability crisis, right? That folks just feel like is causing problems in their household budgets, and they don't feel like that much progress is being made on that. And so I think it's natural that when people feel like their situation is not as good as it should be, they look for change. They blame whoever is in office, in charge, and they say, okay, we got to change it. So a recent poll says 37% say Democrats have a better economic approach. This isn't a Reuters Ipsos poll. This isn't some crazy CNN or ABC or more left-leaning media outlet. 37% now say the Democrats and 36 Republicans. Now, wasn't too long ago, like back in March, it was 45% said Republicans would handle the economy better, and 25% said Democrats. So that's how those lines have crossed and flipped. And I think this is just because, to a great extent, people aren't happy with the price of gas. As I've said before, that may be the most powerful campaign sign in our landscape. There's all the signs in front of the C-stores advertising the price of fuel at their particular outlet there. So this kind of reminds us a bit of the I don't know if you remember this. This was a spoof of a Bush-Dukakis presidential debate. I remember this in 1988 when I can't remember which one of the actors, I should say, played the Bush character and kind of babbled something incomprehensible. They always sort of made fun of him in that respect on the economy. And Dukakis' reply was, I can't believe I'm losing to this guy. That's the way I feel. I can't believe we as Republicans are losing to the Democrats on the subject of economic policy. People have short memories. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Attention, adoring fans! It's time for
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Okay, so yesterday, we talked a bit about Palantir, the data analytics company, because they were announcing their earnings after the bell. Blowout quarter. I don't know if you saw this, Rhino. Revenue growth of 149% year over year. That's in their U.S. commercial revenue, 93% overall. Year over year. So commercial revenue 149%, government revenue 90%, overall 93%, 19% quarter over quarter. So they generated $1.9 billion of revenue. Said they closed 220 deals over $1 million. That is incredible. Total contract value. So what that measures when they close a deal and execute contracts with a customer, depending on the nature of the solution being sold in the IT industry, there will be a term in that contract. You got to commit to this many months, years, whatever the term provisions are, to receive this price. Now, sometimes you'll have contracts that you can cancel for convenience anytime, and you don't get the benefit of discounted pricing on whatever it is you're buying. Cloud services would be an example. The vast majority of the cloud services delivered by the hyperscalers, there is a contract, but as far as a term, usually there's not. It just depends on the size and scope and scale of the services being offered. But if, for example, you launched a business today and you wanted to host some applications in Amazon's cloud, you could go sign up online today, deploy your apps on their infrastructure, start consuming that and paying for the usage in accordance with the pricing that they publish. And if you decide, I don't want to do that anymore, you just terminate it. But if it's a large scope and scale of service that requires lots of assets and resources, you're probably going to have to sign on to a little longer term because they've got to make a major investment to provision those services, and that's kind of what this is all about. But I just want to explain. So the total contract value would be, easy example is, let's say it's $1 million a year, and you execute a contract for 3 years. It's $3 million total contract value. But they say that's $3.373 billion. That's a 49% increase. So this is really what got my attention, Rhino. They generated on $1.9 billion of revenue, $1 billion of net income. Once again, super high margins that they're able to maintain because people are willing to pay the price. They generated $1.2 billion of cash from operations. So, and that's a result of the reason there's a discrepancy or a disparity between their net income of $1 billion, their cash of $1.2 billion, is because they had a lot of non-cash expenses, such as depreciation, that are considered in the calculation of income in accordance with accounting principles, but that's different than the amount of cash that was generated. So, bottom line is, these guys blew it out, and last I checked, Rhino, their stock was up considerably today, and like 20%, if I'm not mistaken. And I believe as well, of course, I know that that is driving the NASDAQ, powering it into really new heights, up 501 points right now. Yet Palantir is up $34 a share. That's 27%.
I think one of the main reasons people are leery of Palantir is because they're not exposed to what they do. So that mystery, that vacuum is filled with conjecture and conspiracy and misinformation. A large chunk of that profit for Palantir comes from them employing Foundry with a company like Airbus, making giant airplanes and coordinating parts and keeping on top of supply trains and schedules and all kind of stuff in that sector of manufacturing. Or with racing. Palantir's partnered up with Ferrari in Formula One.
I didn't know that.
Where they set up thousands of sensors on the cars, and then they use Palantir to aggregate the information into digestible chunks that they can actually use to make the cars better. Or you look at finance, the world of finance, like banking. Palantir has a whole suite of AI tools that banks use to find money laundering and fraud. Like it's not this giant black box of Big Brother out there. They're selling services that people and companies want. They just also happen to sell services to the military,
right,
and the government. It's no different than Boeing making 747s for all the airlines and making planes for the military. They're just a company selling stuff.
You're spot on, and you're right that a lot of us just don't exactly know what it's kind of we used to call it in the IT world. It's a black box. What's in that black box? But they have extremely bright account managers that are out calling on major enterprises, and they're dealing with extremely bright consumers of technology, users of technology, our country's largest enterprises. You just named some of them. And they get inside a room and start whiteboarding what all this stuff does. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not too much. I lived in that world. And they say, yeah, we can use that in our business. And that's how these deals come about. And you don't really see or hear or know a lot about it. But almost everything you consume these days, it's got some data analytics component behind the scenes. These guys just said they closed 200 deals of more than $1 million. That's a lot. So customers are seeing the value of what they're selling. That's the point. They wouldn't be spending money on it. And I can assure you, they want use cases. They want references. They want examples. They want to talk to people that said, yeah, we hesitated, but we bought this stuff. It's incredible. I've watched it my whole career, and that's exactly what's happening. And the market likes it. The market believes in it because the customers are saying, yeah, it's good stuff. It's working for us.
Here's a super simplified hypothetical situation. Say you are the floor manager of a manufacturing plant, and you use a specific bolt, and your one of your responsibilities is maintaining the inventory of that bolt so that it can be used in the manufacture of whatever you're making. Well, you can manually maintain the inventory, putting eyeballs on it and checking it, writing out the inventory, doing the math, finding a vendor, finding the best vendor for the best price and all that. And you can use those cycles as the manager and take away from your other responsibilities. Or you can have Palantir show up and say, hey, we can put a sensor on the box full of bolts. We can put an app on your computer, and then when the bolts get low, the app on your computer says, hey, you need more bolts. Here are 3 vendors. Give the go-ahead on which one you want. And it does it all automatically, freeing up the cycles for you to do everything else you're responsible for. That's a super simplified, hypothetical example, but it's just one example of a plethora of things you can do with this technology. And that's why I'm a bit abrasive to people that are so gung-ho against it, because you're not seeing the forest for the trees.
Totally agree. We all benefit from efficiency, from economies, from agility. And that's what all these companies are seeking, because it's a competitive world. And they're all in a constant race, constant competition. And they see technology like this is giving them an edge. Often they got to do it just to keep up. Some of them hope maybe we can figure out a way to gain an edge using this technology. But at a minimum, if we don't, we fall behind, we get squashed. The market leaves us behind. The U.S. economy right now, this is both a positive and I would say a bit of a negative. And here's what I mean. It is that we keep putting more eggs in the artificial intelligence basket. It's driving our GDP. It's driving the growth of our economy. That's both a good thing and a bad thing. It's good because growth is good, and a lot of people are benefiting and profiting from it, not just companies, but individuals as well. The challenge is that, are we concentrating, or is there too much concentration of growth just in this one industry? We're not diversifying enough, and that can be a concern. We'll talk a little bit more about that on the other side of the break. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio.
Come on.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
All right, we are back
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
What you want, baby?
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. So Tim and McGee really appreciated your explanation. Yeah, that was a good way to distill down something that's kind of just, I don't want to say it's complex as much as it is just not understood, not widely distributed information about
the simplest
how that
way
model
to
works.
explain AI at this point is if you had a task that you could give to a teenager just starting out in the world with their first job, but it's maybe a menial task or a task that's repetitive or something they just got to think about just a little bit, but it doesn't require a whole heck of a lot of skill. That's what AI is capable of. So if you have any task under your purview that is digital or can be digital, that takes up part of your day that you could automate, but it would be a headache to do it yourself, programming an automation or setting up a system, or it might be expensive to bring an outside party in to do it. AIs offer you that capability, and I think that's being lost in all the shuffle of the conversation around data centers and Terminators and Skynet and all this kind of doom and gloom, because none of that is even in the realm of possibility due to the power density it would require. So it's just a silly fear to have. And I know it's kind of like the flat earth people where most of them, or not most of them, but a chunk of them are doing it just for the laugh, just to get a rise out of people online.
I think that's
true.
They
don't really have a dog in the hunt. They don't really care that much. So it's a bit of trolling. But I look at AI as just another tool. Just if you need to simplify it even more, it's just another app. It's just a little more advanced.
Joey the trucker, by the way, said, have you ever seen what they buy? And you pointed out to me on the break, talking about SNAP benefits. Yeah, we have reined that in somewhat. There are reforms there where you can't use it for certain snack food and sugary drinks and stuff like that. I think that's fine. If the taxpayers are going to pay for your dietary intake, then you ought to be a little more responsible in what you eat and what you buy, especially if you're eating unhealthy, which likely means we're having to pick up more of your health care tab as well. So I think that's fine. But, yeah, it was about time that got reined in, honestly, and got reformed. Makes total sense. I mean, I'd even go so far, Rhino, as to say if I'm picking up your Medicaid, maybe I ought to have a little more say over your lifestyle. Now, I know that's big brother government, but aren't all bets off when your very existence depends on other taxpayer money flowing through the government into your household? You know what I'm saying there. Seems like that's protecting the interest of the taxpayer. Now, if you're on your own, that's a different story. That'd be crazy. I don't want government telling us what to eat and how to conduct our lives from a lifestyle perspective. I hope that folks would take an interest in their health because it's for their own well-being, of course. But there's an economic dimension to it that you can't deny, and that kind of brings that up. So on the C Spire text line as well, so appreciate that, Joey. Walter in Tupelo said, economics determine elections. If it's good, incumbent party will be fine. If not, there will be overturned. Trump made too many people believe he'd lower prices on day one. That's Walter in Tupelo. Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. I think just to your point, Walter, you look at your personal situation, your family situation, your household situation, and if you're just less than fired up about it, you just want change. Well, it's changed. It's not working the way it is, without really thinking through that and understanding, well, how's that change going to change my personal situation? I mean, if we turn control over to the Democrats, how does that help me? I'd argue it doesn't. So I think that's to be considered. He also said, Walter, Dana Carvey did a great Bush in Perot. He sure did, man. I laughed the whole time he was doing it. What a talented impressionist.
Not gonna do it.
Yeah, it was so good with the facial expressions and the hand gestures and certainly the emphasizing the speech.
Can I finish? Can I finish? Can I finish? Can I finish?
That was so good, man. I miss those days when Saturday Night Live really was cast with people who really were truly funny and talented, especially the impersonators. I love that aspect of it. Let's see. Yeah, that is Canadian healthcare. Okay, I hear you. We're going to take a break right here. It's time for Fox News and SuperTalk News. On the other side, it's Jim Leggette, lecturer of economics at Mississippi State. Stay with us. Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 2 of Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. Thanks for being with us today. It's now Jim Leggette, lecturer of economics at Mississippi State University. Hey, Jim, it's been a while since we talked.
It has. I think it was about in June or so. And,
okay.
We talked about World War II as opposed to
right.
economics.
That's right. I remember
we know World War II came out.
I distinctly remember that very interesting conversation. So, man, we've got just a flurry of economic activity, shall we say, going on. And what I mean by that, we got a new Fed chairman, and we got interest rates in focus. We've got a bunch of earnings. We've got the incredibly volatile price of oil, the result of a disruption in supply. We got midterms coming up, so there's a political element to this as well. But, man, overall, it's a lot to keep up with, shall we say, on the economic front. Let's start first with inflation and interest rates. It just doesn't seem like that sticky inflation will get down to the Fed's target, like it or not, of 2%.
Yeah, I think what it probably teaches us, and I use an analogy like this in class, is something like, inflation's kind of like your weight in the sense that you really don't want it to get out of hand, because it's a bear to get it back where you want to. And any of us who've ever tried to lose weight, that last 10 to 15 pounds, you can't really seem to get it out of the way. And you can't get over the finish line. And I think that is kind of the problem. And I think given human nature, we want to declare victory and go home. And you got to be persistent. So I think I agree with what this is probably Milton Friedman. If not, it should be something he'd say is best way to fight inflation is not ever have it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we got a new Fed chairman, of course, since we last talked, and they had one meeting, kept rates the same, had 3 dissenters among the Fed governors, I believe. But it sounds like he's going to employ a little different approach to monetary policy. It lacked specifics, I think, but didn't sound like the standard. Hey, we're going to look at unemployment. We're going to look at inflation, CPI, PCE. We're going to make a call based on that. Sounded like he's open to maybe changing some of those inputs.
Well, I think that's healthy because, as you know, every now and then you have to step back from your processes and ask yourself, are you doing it right?
Yeah.
And that may, and one of the things I kind of found help, this is one of these, if you read below the headlines in the Wall Street Journal thing, he's created a handful of task forces with, of course, task force is often an excuse not to do stuff. But these are kind of like a handful of task force people from the Fed and in academia and otherwise looking at things. In fact, the author of the textbook I use is chairing the session on inflation.
Okay.
And why I even bring that up is not because I like the author of the textbook, which I do, but more importantly, as you know, every organization needs to step back from time to time to ask themselves if they're doing it right.
Sure.
Now, you can make an argument we've been doing it at least the way the foundation's Alan Greenspan laid, which is pretty darn good. But this is not 1987 either. So, and you may look at this thing and conclude, hey, we're kind of doing it okay. Keep doing it, or let's tweak it. And maybe that's why this inflation is persistent. In the sense you're applying the wrong tool. I don't know, but it'd be interesting for somebody who's spent some time thinking about it, see what they determine. I think the other point you raised is, you went through that litany of stuff going on. It's a pretty complicated time to be, challenging is probably a better word, challenging time to do the Fed thing. War's problematic in and of itself. You guys were talking about AI. It's both a promise, and vapor. Vapor is not the right word. An illusion. I think Rhino was on the right track. It's going to change a lot of jobs that can be automated, but the complex human elements are still there. There's somebody writing the Wall Street Journal about that. And I think what it really points to, and this is advice from all of us, whether you're 20 or 70, you better continue to learn, or you're going to be on the economic scrapyard. And if you're that kid who's cheating to get your college degree, when the inevitable purge comes wherever you end up, you'll be the one thrown over the side.
That's exactly right. You will be a casualty. But, I appreciate you saying that. That's a message that I've delivered in my opportunities to speak. Yeah. To college students in particular that are about to enter the workforce and launch their professional careers. Guys, don't think that the learning stops when you get that degree. It's just starting. That's just a license to go learn more is all that is.
Well, in fact, my dad used to preach this, and of course, 30 years later, I said, oh, yeah, darn it, he was right. If you do your college program correctly, you have taught yourself how to teach yourself.
Yeah.
And you think about when you leave high school, you're relying on somebody else to teach you. And at some point in college, you got to figure out, you got to succeed whether you hate the class, the professor, or everything else. And as you know, in the business world, you got to figure out how to succeed whether you like your customer, your coworker, or your boss. And the guy who can continually learn will always do well.
Yeah.
The guy who thinks whatever job you started out to shoot's the one you don't keep. That'd be personal. In fact, our niece, she was happy she's through classes at med school. I said, why do you think you're through classes and exams? Well, I said, your dad's a lawyer. Every time he walks in the courtroom, that's an exam. Right.
Well, I don't know if you caught this article or not in the Journal. I touched on it a bit before we went to break at the top of the hour, Jim, but Wall Street Journal is discussing how we are living in an AI-driven economy. In fact, there are economists who say that all the factors associated with the data center boom and the AI build-out account for about one-third of our GDP growth. One-third. In one industry. I can't remember where one industry accounted for such a considerable and significant component of GDP growth. There's a good and a bad aspect of that, right? The good thing is this is great. We're growing the economy, and a lot of people are benefiting from it. The concern is that is there too much concentration?
Well, that's right. And I think the other thing, and I was trying to think of the right word to use about AI. The word I'm going to use is gold rush. there's an awful lot of money to be made. So all this money is rushing in. The same article I read in the Wall Street Journal, the guy was, I forget, he was Lululemon, I think, and Lululemon, I forget what it's called. But the point was, companies really don't know what AI is, but they figured they better slap AI on whatever they did, right?
Yeah.
And I think, and maybe a good analogy, think back 30 plus years ago, everybody had to have a .com something.
Yep.
But only a handful actually figured out what that really meant. And I think that's what, and I think Rhino's insight is keen. If you use AI to solve problems, and I could come up with numerous examples, I become a believer. Solve problems, automate things, help you get to answers quicker, it will do well. If you don't use it to write your emails, you might as well have it help you fill out your unemployment form. Right?
That's a good point, and I agree. I think the main value in business, I would say, is just productivity, saving time. And all the economists are predicting that we're going to continue to see strong earnings growth and strong GDP growth because of productivity. And I think it stands to reason, does it not, Jim, that the only way to increase wealth is to increase output per human man hour?
Last time I checked, and I have a whole lecture, 2 lectures on that. That's the only way around it. We get right down to it. That's how wealth is created. All the other ideologies move it around.
Yeah.
And that doesn't get you there. And the other thing I would say is, we think of AI destroying jobs.
Yeah,
that's true. Schumpeter's right, creative destruction. But there are going to be jobs we don't even know
100%
exist that are being created. And there's some smart guy or gal is going to make a bunch of money.
100%. We got a break right here. If you can hang around, we keep talking.
All right. Yeah, this is fun.
We got Jim Leggette, lecturer of economics at Mississippi State, calling into the Element Wealth studio. We're coming right back.
Hi, this is Mark.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
Now, on to the real part.
Dynamite!
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Charles bumping us into this segment here. We are live in the Element Wealth studio. We're visiting with Jim Leggette, lecturer of economics at Mississippi State University. So we've had periods in the past, I think, Jim, where we had sort of outsized concentration in an industry powering our economy. You go back to the 30s. I know you're aware of this, but we were pretty much an agriculture industry. We had to eat more than anything else. Yeah. And like a third of our population of workers was involved in the agribusiness, yet we struggled to feed our population of 130 million. Now we got 350 million, 2 to 3% of our population is involved, and certainly from an industry sector perspective of our GDP in agriculture. And they're so dang good, they make so much, they can't make any money at it. And the government has to come in and subsidize them. So that's just kind of the evolution there. We went through the manufacturing period, post-World War II, and now we're kind of in this technology period.
Yeah, and I think you're raising a very interesting question. Economies are very resilient things. And if you're successful and profitable today, you better, was it Andy Grove talked about the way you survive is to run paranoid? Because if you're that successful, somebody's going to figure out how that, and there's a whole school of economics that debate what you do about concentration in industries, antitrust, and then there's a fellow from the University of Chicago who says do nothing. And of course, everybody, can't do that and his point was kind of what we're going down is innovation and the desire for profit. And his most compelling evidence to me is you look at the Fortune 500 from 50 years ago and today, it's not the same thing.
Totally different.
Does anybody take Sears seriously?
Exactly.
You thought Amazon was a river, right? And Apple was something you eat. And which means if you think Bezos is making too much money, and I'm going to argue he's not in a second, maybe for some contrarian reason, don't worry about it. It'll take care of itself. But here's you're talking about productivity. This is an interesting point. I think that this probably is a Wall Street Journal. It sounds like something the Wall Street Journal had done. Some professor had done some analysis of the value that Amazon brought to its average customer. $300 a year because I don't have to go to the friggin' store.
Yep.
I don't have to search for it. And think of all the obscure things. Oh, I need that. I don't know where the heck to find that in Mississippi. And in a day or so, it shows up at your door. I think for me, it's more than $300, but you get the point.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen, I talk about this a lot in my speaking, Jim. If you haven't, I would encourage you to look it up. But when Bezos stepped down as the CEO of the company, he wrote a letter to his shareholders. 21 time frame, something like that, I believe. Yeah. And he went through incredible, excruciating detail of the value the company was providing across the categories of stakeholders, employees, third-party vendors, customers, of course, stockholders. And he went through and he used math to quantify. This is how much value, to your point.
Math, that won't work.
Oh, I know. And he went through, he threw these numbers out there. It was like $330 billion of value. Yeah. But he had the math to support that across each of those categories. I just thought this is what every CEO ought to be telling their shareholders, their employees, all the stakeholders, their partners. It was excellent.
Yeah, and that's why. And when you think about it, one of the things that triggered is jobs that create. Okay, Sears went away, but look at all the Amazon distribution centers and all my desk is covered with tech gadgets, not heavy hitters, but those silly little things that make your desktop more productive.
Yeah.
You know what? If you can blow however much you blew on a wedding in Venice, okay. I don't care.
Exactly.
I chose to buy your product. You served me. I don't care what you do with the money.
Yeah, it was this 2020 letter. It was just unbelievable when he went through by those categories. I just thought, golly, for a CEO like that to provide that sort of detail and chart that out, exactly how much value they had created to the various stakeholders in the company. Man, that's what the purpose of a company is to provide value to society. And he went through each of these different partners, parties, stakeholders, people with an interest in the company. This is how much value we provided to them. Excellent.
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to use some of that because I found that thing about what the $300 or so it saved me. But that's interesting, in a sense. Wait a minute, I changed the world. Lots of things got created that provide value. And maybe old Milton Friedman is right again. The purpose of business is to bring value to its owners.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, Friedman made that. And by the way,
do that, nothing else matters.
100%. But the market will sort it out. It'll tell you whether or not you're providing value. It is the only litmus test of value. Yeah. And markets don't reward hard work. I say this all the time. They reward value. They don't care about how hard you worked. Unfortunately, we have people in this country, on the left in particular, that say, well, they worked hard, they deserve more. No, that's not what drives economic rewards.
That's not what works. Karl Marx talked about the labor theory of value, and well, that didn't work.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. Yeah. So I don't know. I found this fascinating. I still refer to that as maybe the best letter penned by a big company CEO I've ever seen. So he personally got rewarded for the value his company produced for society, and that's the way it works.
He changed society, so that's how you should be rewarded, as opposed to the characters Atlas Shrugged. You're rewarded because you know how to work the system.
Oh, exactly right. That's 100% right. Now, I got to ask you about this. You've probably seen the president. He is he's criticizing the big oil companies, saying they're making too much money. They need to give some money back. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm going to say what I really think. If a Republican was going to say that, I'd just as soon have had Bernie Sanders. At least you'd expect that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, I also have a cartoon from class, and it has a congressman dressed as a donkey and beating up on the oil guys and said, well, I think we'll just have to repeal the law of supply and demand. And I tell my students, try suspending Newton's laws of thermodynamics and then come back and tell me how that works.
Yeah, it's embedded in nature. It's natural.
That's right. It's not an act of Congress.
Exactly. Yeah, I was a little surprised, that the president, I understand, because folks, it's a political matter, and folks are frustrated with the high price of gas and energy, and that, of course, is making the cost of other stuff expensive as well. We got the midterms coming up. But that was a little surprising, because I think most of those companies not only support the president, but they have been exploring and producing more. When I saw the CEO of Chevron yesterday on the Business Channel, he says we're not out of the woods yet, even if the war ends, with respect to the supply of oil.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And I think the other thing people lose track of, oil is such a boom and bust industry. They may be making money hand over fist this earnings season, and someday it's going to bust. And I think it was after COVID, Exxon lost like $40 billion or some silly amount of money.
Yeah. And they made $14 billion last quarter. That's a lot, but I'm sure you're aware of how much money some of these big tech guys are making. NVIDIA made $53 billion last quarter, which is just, they made almost as much as Exxon does in a year.
Yeah, and then which is, and then the other thing is, if you look at the run rate of oil industry profitability, I think it's like 7%.
Yes,
which sounds great. But it's not that special.
No, it's just slightly above Kroger, but it's less than
exactly.
So you sort of got Kroger.
And it's certainly not up there with drugs.
Oh, exactly. So, yeah, if you look at net operating income percentages, you have to take that into consideration. It's not a terribly profitable business, but we got about a minute left. But we also have to acknowledge they don't control the price of the commodity that they sell, the Exxons, the Chevrons of the world.
And then one of the things, and my wife and I were discussing this morning, but I think the point you should remember, what you paid for something has nothing to do with the value people perceive in it.
Totally true. That's absolutely 100% right. And the same is true with respect to wages and compensation. Yeah. Same is true there. It's just...
Yeah, there's a medieval, actually it's medieval, theory called the just price. George, you can't charge that much. It's just not right.
I got you.
And it's a theological document.
Jim Leggette, appreciate it, Jim. Jim Leggette, Lecturer of Economics at Mississippi State, has been our guest. Appreciate it, Jim. We'll talk again soon, man. Thanks.
We'll solve another problem.
You got it. Coming right back, folks.
And on what you do. It ain't too bad the way you using me, 'cause I sure am using you to do the thing you do.
Bring it on. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
It is on.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Turn my back to the wind, catch my breath before I start off again. Living on without a moment to spend, to pass an evening with a drink and a friend. I let my skin get too thin, I'd like to pause
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. We appreciate you joining us, of course. So, Paul in Meridian says, talking about the president, he was griping about the price of gasoline not being a direct reflection of the price of oil. So I guess I would ask the question, Paul. First, should it? And then secondly, should the government dictate to the private sector what their gross profit, what their selling price should be, what their gross profit should be, what their expenses should be, what their compensation to their executive team should be, what their net income should be? That's socialism. That's just socialism. That is as blatant and prolific an example of anything. So it is true that the big oil companies are profiting from the high price of oil that is being driven by the disruption in the supply of oil. So the net income for BP, for example, that's one of the companies that Mr. Trump talked about. Their net profit came in at $2.35 billion over the same period last year, and $3.2 billion for the first 3 months of 2026. So there's no doubt that prices have surged, and he lashed out. He said they're making, quote, too much money off higher fuel prices amid the Iran war, reiterating his demand for lower prices at the pump. They're making too much money based on a shortage. I don't like it. That's what he told reporters. So, does Palantir make too much money? Who's to determine how much they should make? That's the question. And these companies, I'm not defending ExxonMobil, but if you take a look at their historical net income over the years, for example, in 2020, they lost $23 billion. Lost $23 billion. Now, it rebounded, and that was during the COVID period, and they made 17 in 22. They did a little better in that particular year, but then it declined again. 11, 12 on average, 9, 10. Fast forward to today, where they're on a run rate of making probably $40 billion this particular year. But they don't have any control over the price of oil. That is a globally traded commodity. About the only thing they can control is the supply. And when the price is depressed because there's not enough demand, they reduce supply. And when the price rises because demand exceeds supply and it's difficult to sell the product, then they produce more, and that lowers the price. So I understand the president's frustration because, again, this is a political matter. This is going to figure in to the elections. But I can't support the idea of the federal government. This is what Bernie Sanders and Liz Warren say. The big oil companies make too much money. They make just slightly as a percentage of net income, just slightly more than grocery stores do. Kroger. People know the grocery industry as being notoriously low margin. High volume, low margin. But they don't come anywhere close to many other industries, certainly these big tech companies. It's just amazing to me, Rhino. Nobody complains about them because, like I said, nobody writes a check to NVIDIA. Well, companies do that buy their chips, but consumers don't. Consumers use the services produced by the companies that procure chips from NVIDIA. Micron, another example. They procure products and services from the companies that buy Palantir technology. It's more of a business to business, where consumers interface from a financial transaction perspective with technologies when you go buy your computers, your end-user devices. That's what folks are accustomed to. I go buy a phone, I buy a laptop, I buy a pad, I buy a PC, etc. They're accustomed to that, and they don't say much about, those prices because, man, we've watched through the years the price of all that stuff relative to the power and the capacity you get and the performance has declined substantially. I mean, what you can get today for the same amount of money that would have bought you something in that same category a few years ago is considerably more powerful. I think that's the difference. A commodity like oil, though, where you're driving into the Exxon gas station and you're paying for that gas, maybe you're mad at Exxon. They're making too much money. But again, I think the market is the best arbiter of that. And is there this law that says, hey, when the price of oil goes down, the price of gas should? We tried that, Ryan. It was called the windfall profits tax. I don't know if you remember that back in the 80s when oil was so volatile. And they wanted to tax the oil companies if they experienced an increase in profit because of the global price of oil going up. You just got to pay us more taxes because of that. And, of course, that just gets passed on to consumers. So that idea really didn't last a whole long time. But it's a tough one. I get it. And I understand the president's frustration because he wants to deliver for the American people. And right now, can you think of anything, Rhino, that's got folks' attention in terms of affordability more than gas? Maybe health care. You're hearing a lot of squawks and complaints about that. They're getting notices at work. Your premiums are going up. You're in the individual market. Your premiums are going up. We just got rid of all the crazy Biden subsidies in the ACA. Lots of people signing up for that and saying, I can't afford it anymore, and they're backing out. So that, in polls, has topped the list as an affordability priority, talking about health care specifically. But certainly at that same level has got to be what you're paying for gas, because everybody's paying for it, either directly or indirectly. In the part of the country we live in, pretty much you get around by driving in your car. And you're going to have to buy gas to make that car work, unless you got an EV, I guess. So it's a concern, and it is certainly a political issue, and the Democrats are going to pounce on it. Of course, they got zero ideas for this. What are they going to do? Revive the restrictions on drilling for oil like they had under Biden? I mean, because when the president came in, as you remember, he rescinded lots of those orders and opened up our lands and relaxed a lot of those restrictions and regulations, and the oil and gas companies have leveraged that. But they also are trying to manage supply so as to keep the price at a level where they can make money. So it's a sweet spot that they're constantly searching for to regulate the supply with demand so that they can sell enough of it and still make a profit. That's the needle they're trying to thread on a daily basis, especially in an industry where you're at the mercy of the market when you sell that product and you place it into the markets that trade that commodity. That's where your revenue comes from. Agriculture, same way. You're at the whim of the commodities trading markets. You don't show up and say, this is how much you're going to pay me for them soybeans. It don't work that way. They'll say, take a hike. This is the market price, right? And sometimes our farmers are able to make money on that. Sometimes they're not. Similar deal here. But we had Andy Berry in, just thinking about that last week, with the Cattlemen's Association. He is state senator saying, we're making money now in the beef industry, but, man, we went through many years where it was tough. And so the fossil fuels industry, because it is commodities-based and subject to the commodities markets, it's also extremely volatile, and that's a point there. You probably saw here at home that Attorney General Lynn Fitch has announced that she is a candidate for governor, so that expands the field to 3. You got Commissioner of Agriculture Andy Gibson, the former Speaker of the House Philip Gunn, formally having announced, and now today appearing on the Richard Cross show, the Mornings with Richard Cross. Attorney General Lynn Fitch says she is in as well. The Ag Commissioner Andy Gibson did publish a rather lengthy plan for the state of Mississippi, and I reviewed that as governor, his ideas there. I'm going to cover a few of those in the next segment. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
We're gonna rock till broad daylight. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight.
Poly Up of Mississippi.
You know what that means.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
We'll do it live
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Before I get to some of the provisions of Commissioner Andy Gibson's plan as governor, on the Larry in Flowood says, I understand that gas retailers sign a contract locking in a price from the wholesalers over a set period of time. So why does the retailer seem to raise the prices immediately when a world event rocks the oil markets? Does the contract that gas retailers have with the gas wholesalers not cover a price per gallon? No, that would be price fixing. That would be collusion. A distributor, we used to, Rhino, you may remember this, we used to have laws in this country that I disagree with called fair trading laws. I don't know if you're familiar with that concept, but basically it said that it did dictate to retailers that they had to sell at a certain price point based on the cost of the input, the landed cost of the goods, fair traded. And you're looking at it, right? So you couldn't.
Yeah, it got repealed in 75.
Yeah, it was terrible. I remember my dad dealing with that. My dad was a rep for a clothing manufacturer, sold to retailers. And they couldn't discount it, even if they wanted to. Right. And so 75, I was a junior in high school then. I remember him complaining about that because it was causing him problems with his customers, which were both big and small, mainly department stores and men's stores across our state. So bottom line is, no, you cannot negotiate a price with a distributor that says you got to sell it for this price point. That would be collusion. Is it just a contract that the wholesaler guarantees to deliver X number of gallons but does not lock in a price? Larry, I'm not even sure. It's Larry and Flowood. I'm not even sure that there's a term, if you know what I'm saying, Rhino, in that contract. I don't know if it says, yeah, for this many months, days, years, whatever, we're going to sell you oil or gas, it would be finished gas, a distributor at this price. I can't imagine they would lock into that, honestly. I don't know that that's the case. I think maybe a contract that just sort of set forth the terms and conditions and the frequency and the volume and all that sort of stuff is part of the delivery logistics. I can see that. But setting a fixed price on a product that's so volatile, it may be a fixed price that says, except for when the global price of oil changes, which means you don't have a fixed price. It's kind of like the Public Service Commission, Rhino, I think this would be an example, that regulates the price that electricity providers and gas providers charge to customers. But there's a provision in those regulations that allows fuel adjustments. You see it on your bill all the time because that is a variable component that's extremely volatile. And so they don't have to go before the PSC and say, hey, look, the price of natural gas, which drives the price of electricity as a variable cost, it just went up a bunch. We're going to have to pass that on to the ratepayers. They can do that without going before the commission and saying, may we please raise the price because our incoming price, our supplied price. So again, let the market sort this out. If we don't like the price and aren't happy with the retailer of this retail gas the price went down on the global oil commodity market, but you didn't lower the price, go somewhere else. It's not like there's no competition there. There's plenty of competition among those guys. So maybe not a nickel cheap. Gerard, doesn't Walmart do that? I think they get a nickel cheaper on every dollar than any other person their suppliers sell to, or at least I've heard that. That's not actually collusion. I have dealt with Walmart. That's Chris from Oxford. As a vendor, and I was just telling Rhino over the break, the Walmart model is built on volume. And they leverage their volume with their vendors to get the lowest price. Simple as that. They make their money on procurement, not sales. If you understand what I'm saying there. That's how the model works. And your choice is you either do business with Walmart under their terms or not. You don't dictate it to them because they got all the cards. They got all the leverage because of the massive volume. That's how their model works. It's interesting. At one point, retailers could only add 3 to 4 cents per gallon of gas. The cost was based on what it would cost on the replacement fuel to the retailers. That's why prices. That's Jim in New Albany. I don't think that's true, Jim. That's price fixing. That's colluding. He
said it at one point.
Okay, maybe that was during the old free trade era. Yeah, I get that, which was bad policy. That was government price fixing is what that was. Thank you, Jim. I apologize. I didn't realize that's what you meant. You're right, but not anymore. I think that's disastrous, and I'm glad we don't have those fair trade policies in place anymore. Man, you talk about something old Bernie Sanders and Liz Warren would have absolutely celebrated. It'd be that, because that's government management of prices. Ultimately, profit as well. We're going to take a break. We got Joel Anand coming back after the Fox News and SuperTalk News.
Welcome to the show that challenges you to think deeply and look beyond political posturing. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. Hour 3 of the program is now live. We're pleased to welcome now Joel Anand Samy, host of America's Roundtable radio program, co-founder of the International Leaders Summit. Hey, Joel, thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much, Gerard. It's great to join you and the listeners of SuperTalk Mississippi Media.
You bet. So I know that you guys track rather diligently events across the pond around the Middle East and in Europe and other continents. But, man, the open border story in Europe, in particular in Spain, this has really been elevated in the news. 60,000 illegal immigrants, it's being reported, have crossed over into Spain, causing all sorts of chaos, wreaking havoc on the country. What the heck's going on there?
Yes, you're right, Gerard. In fact, over 60,000 illegal immigrants crossed into the Spanish North African enclave of what they call Ceuta from Morocco. And this happened within a 24, 36-hour period of time. It overwhelmed the local police force there. In fact, the Spanish government had to call in the military for assistance. And as we found out later on, that at least 57 people died during this surge. And, it just reminds us all that immigration policies matter. So to your question about what really happened in Ceuta and what happened in Spain is that it would be like 42% of Jackson, Mississippi's population of 141,000 people moving in overnight. just overwhelming the local police force and those that are there to protect and to serve. And so from our experiences in the United States, during the Biden and Democratic Party governorship, during that period of time, we know what it was like to have open borders. And in fact, we had 10 to 11 million illegal immigrants crossing over into the United States. And for Spain, what they did was that they created the incentives for this to happen. So in 2015, remember that they had this surge of illegal immigrants coming in from Syria. And then Spain amended its immigration policy to let authorities just reject and return migrants. But recently, Spain's Supreme Court weakened that border enforcement. And to make matters worse, Spain's prime minister went a step further and providing amnesty and providing an application process, and some 1 million individuals applied for asylum. So what does that do? It gave the green light to folks down in the south to saying it's time to move into Spain. And that has caused a major uproar within the European Union. Some 22 leaders from the European Union have signed a letter calling into account what Spain has done because it impacts all of them.
Yeah.
If they enter Spanish territory, they can just take a bus, go to Italy, go to Germany, and that would overwhelm local communities.
Well, Joel, this sort of opening up the doors to non-citizens in these European countries has been going on a while. I mean, Britain has been inundated, France, Germany as well, and it's transformed those countries to a great degree. I mean, didn't they kind of ask for this? Didn't they start this process?
Yes, in fact, Gerard, you are right about it. In 2015, then Chancellor Merkel actually opened up European Union's border. And you had a surge of millions of individuals pouring into European continent. Yeah. In fact, Nigel Farage and the Brexit movement, it gave them quite a bit of momentum to state the obvious that even England could not be able to certainly welcome all these immigrants, these illegal immigrants into Europe. And you're right about it. It has changed the landscape of Europe. We are noticing, for example, the recent incidents over the past 5, 7, 8 years of these terrorist events that are taking place, incidents taking place in Europe, and they're connected to illegal immigrants that have come into the country. And so without proper vetting, without ensuring that you know who is coming through the front door, Europe certainly got themselves into this situation. And it's a reminder for us in the United States that if we do not have good leadership, principled leadership, that takes into account that we have a sovereign state, a sovereign border, that we need to know who comes in and who exits the country. We cannot have this open border policy that Biden had, and it's a reminder to Europeans exactly of the chaos that unfolds when you don't have a proper rule of law based immigration system.
Well, the good news is we reversed that trend in this country with the election of President Trump. As you know, Joe Biden not only just looked the other way and opened up the borders, to a great extent facilitated illegal immigration into this country. And this president comes in and immediately shuts down the border. And he said it during the campaign. We don't need new laws. We just need a president that will enforce the laws we have on the books. And he did so, and that certainly changed it. We don't see these caravans of people crossing over our border with Mexico on a daily basis as we did during the Biden tenure.
Absolutely, Gerard. And it shows what it means to have principled leadership in the White House and in Congress. In fact, President Biden at that time was deferring it to needing to the Congress, saying that we needed new laws. And as you rightfully mentioned, President Trump proved that you don't need new laws. You just need to enforce the laws on the book.
Yeah.
And that means that there is a border system that we have in place, and individuals ought to be vetted. We need to know who's coming through the front door. In fact, if we look at our local communities and our local homes, you certainly do not want to allow strangers to walk in without knowing who's coming into your house.
Sure.
And if you greet a person and you want them into your home, that's your prerogative. But in this case here, we know that not only did illegal immigrants come in, we had criminals, and we had even individuals on the FBI terror watch list that just walked through the U.S. border. So it's a lesson for all of us that we need to remind ourselves that we ought to have elected officials in government that apply common sense solutions and the rule of law, not an open door border policy.
Let's talk about the president's negotiation. Looks like a deal to disarm Hamas. This is big. This is groundbreaking.
Indeed, it is a very important step forward. As President Trump said over time, is that trust but verify. So it'll be very important for the United States and Israel to ensure that Hamas is totally disarmed. And we also have heard from our close sources in Jerusalem that Prime Minister Netanyahu is really focused on making sure that Hamas surrenders. It's an important policy that they have. They certainly do not want to have a Hamas rearm itself and remain in control. And so we have to, certainly give credit to the Prime Minister of Israel and the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, to bring it to this stage whereby Hamas is certainly weakened, but we ought to see Arab nations joining in to verify that Hamas is no longer able to rearm itself and that they certainly are removed from power. And I think that's an important next phase to making sure that they surrender rather than remain in Gaza.
Yeah. Well, this would be a big deal to kind of settle that area down and maybe not have to be of constant concern of what's next in that region coming from people who just want to create and foment chaos.
Exactly. I mean, no one in the state of Texas would tolerate the fact if you had individuals or terrorists on the other side of the border sending missiles and rockets and drones into your backyard every day, and we're talking about hundreds of these coming in. So this will certainly help stabilize that immediate region that Israel is concerned about. Of course, we need to keep an eye on what's going on in Lebanon with Hezbollah. And at the end of the day, we have to remember that Iran is that real problem that we face in the Middle East. So what President Trump is doing is working toward a deal with Iran. In fact, a great number of critics are certainly concerned about what that deal would entail. But I think in the best interest of the Western world and America, we ought to make note and make sure and ensure for the next generation that Iran is not able to obtain a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
If they are able to strike all these countries, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and even Qatar and Kuwait, with missile strikes, can you imagine what they would do if they had a nuclear weapon?
No doubt.
It would be, not just only the end of the Middle East, but a threat to the United States as well.
We got a break right here. If you can hang around, Joel, we can keep talking further about Iran and also the domestic political landscape.
Absolutely, Gerard. Would be honored to doing so.
We're coming right back. Stay with us.
Are you in your element? This is...
Check it out. Let's do this.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's get on with it.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Just as I thought it was going all right, I found out I'm wrong when I thought it was right. It's always the same, it's just a shame, that's all. I could say day and you'd say night. Tell me it's black when I know that it's white. Always the same, it's just a shame, and that's all. I could live, but I won't go.
We are back in the Element Wealth studio. We've got Joel Anand on the line with us talking about stuff happening certainly in the Middle East. And let's continue just on where we stand with this Iranian conflict, Joel. The president says that he thinks we're pretty close to a deal to open up the strait. I don't know what that means with respect to the overarching objective of denuclearizing the nation. I mean, that was, of course, the premise for launching the attacks a few months ago. I just don't feel like we're any closer to achieving that, Joel. What do you think?
Gerard, you are echoing concerns that a great number of our fellow Americans have relayed as well. Policymakers, members of Congress are asking that same question. Now, Secretary Besson stated that today that there may be a deal today or tomorrow to open the Strait of Hormuz with an emphasis on freedom of movement of vessels. Well, that has certainly made an impact on the price of a barrel of oil. The latest that I've seen is that it's around about $76,
yep.
Which is down some nearly 4.5% from the previous days. And so that's a good sign for our American economy. But I think we're all asking that same question. When will this come to an end? And we certainly do not want to see this dragging on for another couple of weeks or perhaps into the next several months. And I think the question that ought to be asked is that do we trust Tehran and its leadership to be able to fulfill what is going to be in this so-called agreement and contract that we have, or agreement with Tehran? And time again, they have not kept up their end of the bargain. And we've been in a situation where we return to the same constant, back and forth, not just only in dialogue and discussions, but like we've experienced for the past 5 months, an open war and missiles, coming into the Gulf states, but also targeting U.S. troops. So this is not something that only President Trump had to deal with. But if we go back to the 1980s, for some 17, 18 months, President Reagan had to deploy the U.S. Navy to actually escort commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. And in fact, President Reagan actually wiped out, at that time, nearly half of Iran's Navy before it came to, an agreement that they would not attack naval or vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. So Iran has been a thorn to our side, but my concern, and I think your concern and others as well, we do not want them to get access or obtain a nuclear weapon. That'll be the end of civilization.
100%, and the president's absolutely right in that. But we have to acknowledge there are political ramifications while the war is in process. It's somewhat disturbing that we're approaching the midterms. We're inside 100 days, and what's top of folks' mind here is so-called affordability. The price of the cost of living is a concern, in particular the price of gas, health care, food, etc. And that's going to influence the way people vote in the midterms. Right now, Democrats have the edge. I just don't think that a lot of voters realize that they don't have any solutions to that problem. In fact, their policy prescriptions would exacerbate that problem.
Absolutely. And you are absolutely right about that. What we are seeing today across America is the surge of Democratic Socialists of America pushing the Democratic Party further to the left. And not just only to the left, I must state, to the far left.
Yeah.
And we noticed what happened in New York City with Miss Chevalier. She was elected in a primary race for Congress. She's not only pro-Palestinian, she is anti-American. At a recent gathering, or I think it was a post that she shared, mentioning that when her hands were dirty, she was able to wipe it on an American flag. Now, that certainly may be scandalous on one side, but the truth of the matter is that if an individual wanting to enter the U.S. Congress as a member of Congress has such great disdain for America, for what it stands for, then the future of our country is at great risk. So for our fellow Americans across the country, whether you are an independent, a Democrat, or a Republican, policies certainly make a difference. And if we are going to see the Democratic Socialists of America pushing their way, coming into Congress, the future of America certainly does not look very bright with more socialist policies that will make it more unaffordable to live in states across the country, not just only in New York City.
We've got key races, Democratic primaries. Today, of course, in Michigan, U.S. Senate primary, certainly by the polls, it looks like that the most far-left candidate, Abdul El Sayed, is likely to prevail as over a more moderate traditional Democrat and would, of course, advance to the general election. And that's important because that's a key swing state, certainly in presidential politics. And then next door we got in Wisconsin, we've got a governor's race, a primary next week. And once again, it looks like the more left-leaning Democratic Socialist candidate, Francesca Hong, is likely to be the Democrat nominee to advance to the general in the dairy state of Wisconsin. Your thoughts?
In fact, Gerard, it's not only Republicans or independents that are concerned about what is happening within the Democratic Party here in the United States, but in fact, we're seeing Democratic leaders relay concerns. Rahm Emanuel, the former mayor of Chicago, and he was the White House chief of staff under President Obama, served in the Clinton administration. He has been decrying what is happening within the Democratic Party with the surge of Democratic Socialists of America and their candidates actually winning at the primary level. So the concerns that we have about Michigan, really in the heartland of America, having a very radical individual that is pro-Palestinian. He is opposed to America's founding principles, perhaps gaining momentum there. We will see what happens this evening with the results. Mike Rogers, who we've known for a great number of years, he was member of Congress from Michigan, is the Republican, most likely the Republican candidate that will be facing the Democratic primary winner from the Democratic side. So we'll see how that all plays out in November. But once again, as we come back to deciding what will happen for America's future, is that the question for our fellow Americans is that do we want a country that upholds the rule of law, is focused on protection of property rights, free market principles, the opportunities that have been given to each one of us to obtain the American dream, or do we want socialism to prevail? And we all know what socialism does, and we've seen that in Eastern Europe. We've seen what has happened across the world, where socialism removes protection of property rights. It enforces and imposes all draconian measures, and inflation rises. We know what that was like under the Biden administration, in double digits. So I think it's a wake-up call, not just only for those within the Democratic Party, but also for us as America, to really encourage our fellow Americans to register to vote, to be informed, to be educated. We truly commend the work that you, Gerard, are doing along with your colleagues at SuperTalk Mississippi Media, not just only informing the enlightened listeners and engaged citizens of Mississippi, but across the country, as your program is streamed across the country as well. We need to, sit up and take notice and make sure that we are informed and educated and make wise decisions when it comes to elections. Individuals cannot sit out. We know what that is like for those that are residents and citizens in the Commonwealth of Virginia. In fact, now Virginia's governor has pushed such radical policies, including tax increases across the board, that even Democrats are concerned about.
Yeah.
So that's what happens when you have Democratic leadership in place.
Man, what a shift from the former governor, Glenn Youngkin. Of course, Virginia, unusual state in that a governor cannot serve in 2 consecutive terms, and that's why Governor Youngkin had to step aside, and that sort of opened the door up. Yeah, it's fascinating to watch. We still got about 3 months before we go to the polls in the midterms. A lot's going to happen between now and then, but most importantly, we need to educate, inform, and analyze and consume information and be objective and be informed when we pull that lever. Appreciate you coming on, Joel. As always, thanks.
Thank you for your leadership, Gerard. Appreciate being with you all.
You bet. We're coming right back in the Element Well studio.
With Gerard Gibert.
Welcome to our shop
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Okay, now you have a good one.
Take the long way home. 'Cause you're the joke of the neighborhood. Why should you care if you're feeling good? Well, take the long way home. Take the long way home.
Supertramp. Take the long way home. That from the Breakfast in America album. What was that, Rhino? 78, 79, something like that? Great tune bumping us into the final half hour of Middays.
Yeah, recorded in 78, released 16th of March, 1979.
Ha-ha, nailed it. Love it. Ben from Madison says, y'all been talking about this for years. Pretty neat to see it coming into reality. I truly hope Mississippi leads in advanced nuclear energy technologies. And what he sent us was a link to some partnerships, projects being formed to deploy small modular reactors in the United States. And Ben, appreciate that. Holtec International, Energy Services, LLC, and Hyundai Engineering and Construction are collaborating on this. The good news is, if you're a fan, as Rhino and I are, of nuclear power, is that there are a number of projects, Ben, that are staged across the United States for nuclear power generation. Going back to 23, it's really when we started to see this take hold and some traction again in development of nuclear energy and construction of nuclear power plants, when Microsoft signed an agreement to purchase power from Helion's planned fusion plant. I'm not exactly sure where that is. And then in September 24, more than a year later, they signed a 20-year agreement to restart one of the reactors at 3 Mile Island. I remember covering that, Rhino, here on the show. That was big news, partnering with Constellation Energy, as I recall, to operate and revive that particular reactor. 3 Mile Island 1, it is referred to as. It did not melt down, by the way, as part of that. And that pretty much scared everybody, and we kind of discontinued, right, the development of nuclear energy. I believe that was a mistake. I believe we learned from that, figured out how to build nuclear power plants, deliver nuclear power in a safe way. And then Amazon invested $500 million in X Energy, that in October 24. Switch Networks, this is one of my old customers, believe it or not, signed a non-binding agreement with Oklo to purchase energy from the Oklo Aurora Powerhouse projects through 2024. That, again, nuclear power. And then there's just more news and more announcements about nuclear power and the deployment and construction of nuclear power plants, mostly driven by the hyperscalers, except just a couple of months ago, I didn't realize this one, Rhino, Walmart signed a deal. Walmart to purchase 176 megawatts from Constellation's Dresden plant in Illinois. How about that? So Constellation Energy obviously on the forefront of development and operating nuclear reactors, nuclear power plants. But
I mean, think about it in the case of Walmart.
Yeah.
The average Walmart store has a trailer from a tractor trailer parked outside 360 days out of the year.
Yep.
A lot of them are storage, inventory, layaway, that kind of stuff. Well, if you could fit a small modular reactor in the same footprint as a shipping container or a tractor from a tractor trailer and park it right outside and lower your energy costs, that would be a pretty smart investment.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Because it's not like it would be a large upfront spend because it's relatively novel technology. But it's also technology that's going to be providing power for decades.
That's right.
To allow you to write it off.
Good point. We should point out the federal government is really pushing under the Trump administration the development of nuclear power as well. The president signed a series of executive orders titled Reinvigorating the Nuclear Industrial Base, Reforming Nuclear Reactor Testing at the Department of Energy, and ordering the reform of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission with the goal of, quote, reestablishing the United States as a global leader in nuclear energy. And then signed another one in February of this year. This came out of the Office of Energy Dominance Financing, and they closed a deal, a loan package with the Southern companies, largest in the Department of Energy's history, that will be used on non-nuclear projects, but will also support nuclear uprates. So, and that is across 6 reactors operated by the Southern company. So, you got the federal government, I didn't even know this, it's making loans to energy companies for the development of nuclear energy because the government feels very strongly. And maybe, Rhino, that's in reaction to, if you look at the projects across the world, many in China. China's gone gangbusters building nuclear power plants. I mean, all over the dang place in China. And so I think this was a reaction to that, where the government decided to inject a little stimulus into the industry. But that's going on. So, you know, I do recall covering this, Rhino. This was last fall, a partnership with Westinghouse. This was interesting to me that Westinghouse was jumping back in to this industry to deploy a fleet of these small modular reactors across the country, working also with Brookfield Asset Management. And, of course, they're providing some financing in that. The government receives a 20% participation interest, wow, in cash distributions from this new combined company above $7.5 billion. That's an interesting financial structure. Just this past March, PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the big 4, commissioned by Westinghouse, Brookfield, and some other financial partners, estimated that a 10-unit fleet in the USA would generate $92 billion in GDP, talking about a fleet of small modular reactors, and support 44,000 jobs annually during a 13-year construction phase. So I would point this out to those who say, those data centers, they just don't produce any jobs. Well, it's true that they're big buildings that don't have a lot of people in them. They got a lot of machines in them, a lot of equipment. But when you think about all of the other businesses that support data centers, that sell something to data centers, like energy companies. So here we got, the only reason they're building these things is because the data centers are coming online. They need more power. They're hungry for power. And the power companies are figuring out, we need more efficient production of power. Nuclear is it. Well, 13 years of construction jobs, 44,000. That sounds like data centers are creating jobs to me. And guess what? This ain't yesterday's construction jobs from a pay perspective because the demand, we've been talking about that today, dramatically exceeds the supply. These guys are making bank on these construction jobs. Life-changing.
One thing about the word fleet, if I'm not mistaken, that's an industry term regarding a company or a country's entire reactor footprint.
Okay. I got it. That makes sense. So sort of the way you would refer to a transportation company's fleet.
Yeah.
An airline's fleet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that makes sense. Okay.
And to add a little context, like breaking it down by country, within the U.S., there are almost 100 operational reactors, but only a little over half of those are commercial plants providing power to the public or to companies and services. China, after their recent push, is somewhere around 60, 65 operational reactors with several more under construction, but the number of commercial ones is unavailable. And then the third country that really is a power in the nuclear world is France. France produces 70% of their power from nuclear, and they're a major exporter of power to other European nations. They make something like $3 billion a year exporting power from their nuclear plants to the rest of Europe.
Okay. Interesting. So I see this as all good news. We're getting more clean, reliable power. We're getting the data center capacity that we need. We're not imposing higher costs on ratepayers. This is all good stuff. And we're creating a whole bunch of jobs and economic activity and wealth. How could you be opposed to that? Coming right back, final segment.
Family term.
Properly set all controls before recording.
All systems go. The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. That's a little Woodstock from the all-hit request line, Gary and the Berg. Football is here, and so is Sports Talk Mississippi. The boys are about to embark on their not fall camp tour in Hattiesburg, Starkville, and Oxford, talking to coaches, players, and getting you ready for the start of the season. This afternoon, Sports Talk Mississippi will be at Sully's in Hattiesburg, where we'll have tons of giveaways. The Not Fall Camp Tour is presented by Pearl River Resort, your destination for casino thrills, family fun, and live entertainment. Go to pearlriverresort.com for more info. In Middays, we're going to be in Brandon on Friday at Efficient Power and Lights Ribbon Cutting. Plus, you'll hear more about our state's energy affordability, economic growth, and Mississippi's energy future. Very timely that we will be doing a remote there, just talking about nuclear power. End of civilization. North Korea has a nuke, and they tell their people they win the World Cup every time. Delusional boomers fear-mongering. I'm not sure what that has to do with boomers fear-mongering. That from the C-Spire text line. Tim from Tupelo says AT&T has in the last few days partnered with D-Wave, the leader in quantum computing. Quantum computing is the next big thing after AI. Yeah, I hear you, and Rhino and I have certainly discussed that quite a bit. It's I wouldn't say necessarily the next big thing. It's on a parallel track. It's being developed. And by the way, if you're a federal taxpayer, I think most people are that are tuned in, you have a vested interest in the development of quantum computing and AI because the federal government, based on the president's orders, just invested about $10 billion across a number of companies involved in the development of quantum computing, including Intl and IBM, as a matter of fact. So we needed to succeed to get a return on our taxpayer investment. Speaking of which, the EPA, while we're talking about it, it is aligning its policies with the White House's executive orders on artificial intelligence and data center development by streamlining the infrastructure rules. And in fact, the EPA will now issue an exemption from certain regulations concerning the generation of power for those power generation facilities that are behind the meter, off the grid, exclusively for data centers. So if you're building out power to power a data center and you're not on the grid, you're behind the meter, dedicated to that data center, the EPA says you don't have to be concerned about a lot of these various regulations that apply to electric generation plants. Interesting. So kind of have mixed feelings about that, honestly. I don't want them to just have carte blanche and go crazy and cut a bunch of quarters and pollute the air.
I see a glaring loophole.
Okay.
Say you have literally anything besides a data center and you want behind-the-grid power. You just got to set up a micro data center.
Well, that's true.
You could literally just put a server rack in a closet.
Call it a data center, huh? Surely they've thought through that, right?
Surely.
So, I talked earlier, before we get out here today, the Ag Commissioner, candidate for governor, Andy Gibson, issued his plan. And he's got several tax provision ideas that got my attention. One was to cut Mississippi car tags in half. You've probably seen him promoting that. But he's doing that through covering the loss of revenue that is produced from car tag ad valorem taxes that goes to school districts, counties, and cities by increasing the legislative tag credit. That just simply means we're going to increase spending at the state level to cover the loss of revenue in these local jurisdictions. By the way, that would cost about $350 million. So that would just be adding $350 million to the state budget. It's really just as a shift of, well, we're going to take revenue from here, but we're going to cover it with expenses over there. And then also says if you own a vehicle 10 years or older, you'll get a permanent tag for an affordable one-time flat fee. I think all that sounds great, except we're not really reducing either spending or taxes overall here. We're just kind of shifting things around, almost like a shell game. There's some other stuff as well. We didn't get to it today. We'll continue that and a whole bunch of other stuff tomorrow. Yeah, Darren in Jackson says, don't call me Shirley. We are out of here today. Back with you again tomorrow. Until then, stay safe and God bless everyone.
SuperTalk Mississippi Media Production.